So today I'm going to focus on kind of the exam format and then the 9 required foundational documents. And I have a cheat sheet for you at the end to give you on the foundational documents. So just a quick reminder on the exam format. It's 2 parts, just like most of it, right? You have the 55 multiple choice questions. This, you have a lot more time than history, the traditional history AP exam. So you have 55 questions in 80 minutes. So you actually have a lot more time than like APUSH or Euro or World.
Oh, 1.5.
It's not quite 1.5, but it's pretty close to 1.5, right? Then you have the free response section. What's important here to note is that they are evenly weighted, right? That these, right, that they're all each FRQ is even. So like the free one, FRQ2, the quantitative one, like can you read the chart, is as worth as many points as like the argumentative essay that you're going to spend a lot more time writing on it.
Oh, in like
On
say 6 points.
that's the rubric is 6 points, but it's weighted in the exam the same amount, right? So like this is like, so if you're like, oh, I think I totally bombed 3 because I couldn't remember what like Engel versus Vitale is, or you're like me and you keep mixing up Tinker versus Des Moines and Engel versus Vitale because I cannot keep them straight in my brain for whatever reason. I don't know why my brain just keeps mixing those up. Right, like that. It's not the end of the world, right? So this one you'll be given that full 100 minutes of time. So it's a 3-hour test, right? Because it's 180 minutes, and you can divide it up. This is just the recommended times for 2020, 2020, 40. You could probably do 1 and 2 in about half an hour, probably. Since I would try to go do 1 and 2 as quickly as possible to save time for 3 and 20 minutes is tougher.
But we can't mix time with section 1, right?
Correct. You can mix time. These you just get.
Yeah.
You can move back and forth on the questions on the blue. It's on Blue Book, just like when you took the SAT. Yeah, took the SAT or PSAT. But it is not. But it'll stop. You cannot go back to section 1. Yeah. Okay, so that's the format. Next week, I'm going to do like specifics on the FRQs after school. So the 9 foundational documents, the first one is the Declaration of Independence, right? So again, you don't need to know the years, but it's just helpful to know a little bit of context, right? This is in the Second Continental Congress, 1776, American Revolution, right? And a few of the key ideas, right, are the governments get authority. I don't know, there shouldn't be an apostrophe there. Governments get authority by the consent of the governed. And must uphold the natural rights of the people, like the basic, like John Locke social contract model, right? Government doesn't come from God or the king; it comes from the people. We give the power to the government in order to protect our natural rights. When the government violates our natural rights, we have the right to form a new government, right? And there's a list of grievances saying that George has violated these rights, and therefore we have the right to rebel, right? So governments exist from people. They have to protect natural rights. When they violate those natural rights, people have the right to overthrow the government. And that's what's happened here, right? So any questions about the Declaration of Independence? That one should be the most straightforward. I'm just going to close the door.
it just gave them independence. It's kind of the point, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, but the reason why, because you wouldn't get a question about like the history of it. You would get a question like on the multiple choice. It's like, which of the following statements is most like in agreement with the principles of the Declaration of Independence? Or you would use it in FRQ4. It could be one of the documents listed to make your argument. So if you're like making an argument about like individual rights or something like that, you don't need to have like direct quotes, but you should be able to refer to kind of like specific ideas from them. All right, so Articles of Confederation, remember, this is the first form of government in the United States established during the Revolutionary War by the Second Continental Congress, and this was in effect throughout the 1770s and 1780s. And here, the key ideas here, the government of the United States should be a loose confederation of autonomous and sovereign states. The primary unit of government should be the state governments, right? The state government should have way more power and authority than the federal government. And that the national government should have limited powers unless basically all, or at least a supermajority of the states should consent, right? No taxes, no army, no chief executive, no federal judiciary, right? Each state gets 1 vote, but basically like the states are sovereign is the key idea, and the like national government is just like think like the EU, but for the United States, right?
I have a question. It says no army, but doesn't this take place during the Revolutionary War? before.
There wasn't a standing army. Like you could,
Like Shade's Rebellion.
yeah, like you could call an army, but like you didn't have like a
I
permanent
see,
army.
I see,
Yeah.
okay.
But the big one was like taxes. And remember, during the Articles of Confederation, the different states could all coin their own money, which created all sorts of like problems.
Yeah.
All right. So because of Shays' rebellion, etc., the kind of financial crisis, we have, right, in 1787, the Constitutional Convention, right? Like, the Constitution's always being rewritten, right? We tend to think of, like, the Constitution was written in 1787. It's like, no, it's not. It was most recently edited in 1992, right? So, like, because we forget that the amendments are, like, the Constitution, not, like, add-ons to the Constitution. All right, so I'm going to go do a quick Constitution review because, like, the Constitution is the one document where they can ask you specific things. On FRQ4, I've seen FRQ4s where they'll say, like, the preamble of the Constitution or the 14th Amendment of the Constitution or the First Amendment of the Constitution. So it is helpful to know a bit about the details. So let's take a look at the Constitution, right? The preamble is the first one. The preamble is the, like, we the people, more perfect union. This is kind of like the mission statement, right? So the key ideas here, like, power comes from the people. We establish governments in order to do all these good things, maintain justice, peace, general welfare, promote liberty, and that's why we made the Constitution. Article 1 is Congress. It's the legislative power. It vests all power in Congress, which will be made up of two houses. The House will have based on population with 2-year terms and direct election, while the Senate has 6-year terms equal. And they're originally chosen by the state legislatures until this is changed by the 17th Amendment. Like, it describes the legislative process. I'm not going to go into detail on that. And it provides for the specific enumerated powers of Congress, as well as specific clauses like the Interstate Commerce Clause and the Necessary and Proper Clause, which expand the powers of Congress. And it places certain limits on what Congress can do. Congress can't violate habeas corpus. Congress can't issue titles of nobility. And there are certain limits on the states. The states can't have their own armies, their own money, or their own foreign policy. Article 2 is the presidency, and it gives the executive power and the president and a vice president that they are to take care the laws are faithfully executed, and they have the power to appoint justices and federal officers. They are the commander-in-chief and the head of state. They are required to give the State of the Union. They can be impeached. They have to be 35, a natural-born citizen. They're selected by the Electoral College, and they can be impeached, right? So those are like the formal powers, right? Executive orders are not formal powers in the Constitution. Article 3 is super short. It says that there will be a Supreme Court and any other courts that Congress makes, and they will have the judicial power, that they have lifetime and tenure unless they're impeached, and that they're the final court of appeals, and that, like, treason is bad. Article 4 governs relations among the states. There's a few clauses that you need to know. The full faith and credit clause, right, that things are valid across state lines, right, like your driver's license, your marriage license. The privileges and immunities, like California can't say, like, people from Nevada are not allowed to come here. And extraditions of accused criminals and escaped enslaved persons, right, if you do a crime and then you flee to Oregon, like, California would be like, Oregon, you need to return this person. And that Congress governs how new states are added, and that Congress is supposed to provide a guarantee of a Republican government to the states. Article 5 is how we can change the Constitution. You can either go through Congress, or you can go through the congressional conventions, but they have to be ratified by 3/4 of the states either way. Article 6 is the Supremacy Clause. It says that the federal is laws trump state law, and the Constitution is supreme. And this idea that there is an oath of office, but no religious test. And Article 7 is how you get ratified. You need 9 of 13 states to ratify it. So, like, you could see, like, Article 1 of the Constitution could be, like, the document listed in FRQ4. The other thing to look at is the Bill of Rights. You should know generally, like, Article 1 is like fundamental freedoms of expression, religion, things like that, right? Article 2 is guns. Article 3 is quartering soldiers. Article 4 is like searches and seizures. Article 5 is due process rights. That includes like taking the fifth, eminent domain. Article 6 is like a speedy public trial by an impartial jury. Article 7 is like a fair trial, trial by jury, fact by law, right? All that fun stuff. Article 8 is cruel and unusual punishment, so you can't be tortured or excessive bail. Article 9, or the Ninth Amendment, right, is the enumeration of rights in the Constitution. Does not mean that there are no other rights. They're like we haven't listed all the rights you have. And then the 10th Amendment, Article 10 of the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that any powers not given to the United States, that means like Congress, by the Constitution that aren't also denied to the states are retained by the states. This is the doctrine of reserved powers. So I have seen FRQs 4s that say like the 10th Amendment to the Constitution listed as a document, right? So you don't need to know like word for word things, but you should be familiar with specific parts of the Constitution because that could be on the essay. Yeah, Bruce. If they say Article 4, they'll say like Article 4 of the Constitution.
Okay, so it's not just like even if I know like full faith and credit, I still need to know like where it's located. Okay?
Yeah. So like 1 is Congress, 2 is President, 3 is courts, 4 is states, 5 is amendments, 6 is supremacy, 7 is ratification, and then the Bill of Rights and the 14th. I've also seen the 14th Amendment is also one that has appeared as like a source. All right, Brutus 1, right? We don't actually know who wrote it. It was probably Robert Yates. But it was written in 1787 to argue against the ratification of the Constitution, and he makes 2 arguments. The first is that the Constitution gives too much power to the federal government, especially the necessary, proper, and clause and the supremacy clause, and that's going to trample state rights. And the nation is too big to be governed democratically. We can't have a republic in a nation this big. The only way to actually they actually believed in democracy and republicanism, but they thought that the only way to do that was to keep the state governments more powerful because that's where you could actually have like representation. That like if you have a big national government, the people in the capital aren't going to know anything about you. So Madison responds to Brutus 1 and other arguments made by the Anti-Federalists in 2 kind of responses. The first is Federalist 10, which is a response to Brutus's argument that we can't have a big republic. And he actually argues that, like, no, we can have a large republic because that's the only way to solve factions. Factions are inevitable in democracies because people have different opinions, and they're all naturally going to kind of form groups. And the only way to get rid of factions would be to, like, make them illegal, which is bad, right? So he says we have to control the effects of factions so that they don't lead to people governing for like private interests rather than the public good. And he says like, look, the Constitution's Republican institutions solve this problem in 2 ways. The first is that having representation rather than direct democracy allows you to have a much bigger country. That's going to dilute the size of dilute the power of the factions because they're going to be forced to compete and balance against each other. And the second is that unlike a direct democracy where the people are likely to be inflamed by passion, representatives naturally care about the public good, and that refines and enlarges the public views. Any questions about Federalist 10? If you know factions, representation good, big country good, Federalist 10 is like kind of associated with this idea of like pluralism and kind of like a pluralist democracy, right? You have lots of different viewpoints that are going to balance each other out, and they're going to be mediated by elected representatives that care about the common good. Federalist 51 answers the critique of Brutus that says that like the national government has too much power by saying that like, yeah, power corrupts people. The kind of like the men are angels line, right? Like if men were angels, no government would be necessary, right? But therefore so he says like we need to create structures that are going to prevent the abuses of power. And so by separating power isn't no one person is both in charge of enforcing the law and writing the law, right? So you have this separation of powers and this idea of checks and balances. He believes that you balance ambition against ambition, that Congress doesn't want the presidency to take away its power, so it checks the presidency. The courts don't want the presidency to become too powerful because that'll mean that they will lose power. And so they check the presidency, and then Congress checks the courts and vice versa, right? The whole idea is that by separating powers and balancing them against each other, you can create a more stable system that prevents the consolidation of power and avoiding the things that Brutus I is worried about. So if you know for Federalist 51, checks and balances, separation of powers, you should be fine, right?
Yeah.
Federalist 70, now we're getting into the Hamilton ones. Hamilton wrote this to defend executive power and that why the president is one person, right? So, for example, Switzerland has an executive council of 7 people. Like, their chief executive is 7 people, right? The Directory in Revolutionary France had 5 people, right? Like, you can imagine different, like an executive council rather than an executive person, but Hamilton argues that a single person has 2 benefits. The first is that they can make decisions more quickly because you just ask the president, and then they say, do this or that. And it is more accountable, right? You can more easily hold the president personally responsible when it's just the president, rather than like an executive council when something bad happens and everyone just points the finger at everyone else, right? Any questions about 70? If you know this idea of like a unified and an energetic executive, like the energetic executive is really the key idea. Like that's the phrase that AP readers are looking for, is like energetic executive. And then 78 is the argument for the courts. It makes a few arguments. The first is that the courts are the weakest branch, right? They don't have the ability to use the course of force like the executive branch does, and they don't have the ability to spend money like the Congress. But they are important because they must have the power to strike down anything opposed to the Constitution in order to preserve liberty. That he thinks that if the courts cannot rule what the actions of the other branches are constitutional or not, then don't actually have a constitution. You need someone who is there to enforce the boundaries of the Constitution. So even though the words judicial review are not in the Constitution themselves, Hamilton is saying is that that's what the whole purpose of Article 3 is. And he argues that he defends this idea of lifetime tenure because the whole point of having judges appointed for life is that they're not seeking re-election, they're not seeking reappointment, so they're less likely to get involved in partisan politics, right? Any questions about 78? Okay. The last one, and I know that we'll actually talk about this one on Friday in more detail, is a letter from a Birmingham jail because for some reason the AP readers believe that there's no important writings in government and politics between 1788 and 1963. I don't know why.
What would you add if you were interned with her?
I would have... That's actually a good question.
Well, what is letter from Birmingham jail? Like, what's it prevent?
It's an
Civil to be.
Yeah, so let me do that first. And so a letter from Birmingham jail, right? It's when he's in prison for trying to get people registering to vote in Birmingham, Alabama, and he's responding to this letter, a plea for unity, which was a letter written by, or an open letter, because everything's an open letter, by a bunch of white clergymen, but both Jewish and Christian faiths, mostly Christian. I think there was one rabbi who signed on, being like, look, we agree with the principles of civil rights and racial equality, but we don't believe that these outside agitators should be coming in and causing a ruckus, right? Go through the courts, go through the legal process. And King is like, no. Civil disobedience is how we actually lead to legal change, right? So civil disobedience is justified because unjust laws aren't really laws, right? If a law is unjust, we have a moral obligation to violate that law in order to demonstrate its unjustness, and that it doesn't matter that we don't live in Alabama, because he says an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we have the right to come in and intervene and help, and that the goal of civil disobedience or direct action is to actually force people to come to the negotiating table. If you don't actually force people to, you're never going to actually lead to that legal change that the call for unity people really like. And there's a bunch of other extra things, it says the language of wait always means never, right? That it's never a convenient time to do the right thing. And he has the line where he says that the biggest challenge to civil rights and racial progress is not the Ku Klux Klan, but is the white moderate who says I'm on your team, but do you have to be so loud? And that's one of the other famous lines, right? If I was adding things, I don't know what I would add. because like it's like because the documents are just kind of weird. Like some of them are like like the Constitution. Then you have like a bunch of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, and then you have this like rhetorical like argument which isn't law, right? What I would actually have would be like foundational like theories or like ideas, right? Like the tragedy of the commons, or like like knowing specific like theory, like things like that, like explanatory theories or something like that, more than just like this one doesn't like the other ones are all about like the Constitution, and then this one is just like kind of like outlier, so it's kind of weird in there. I'm glad they included it, but because I think it's an important essay, but it's like weird in the curriculum, like how it fits. Okay, so again, why do you need to know the foundational documents? You need it for FRQ4. Like you cannot get like FRQ4, you have to use evidence from one of those listed documents, right? Now, evidence does not have to be a direct quote, but they are looking for like more than just like, in Federalist 78, Hamilton defends the judiciary. Like you need to talk about like, oh, like the idea of like judicial review, or the idea of like lifetime appointment for judges, right? It can't just be say like Martin Luther King in the letter from Birmingham jail promoted civil rights. Like it needs to have like something specific from those arguments. The other piece of evidence that you develop in the essay can be from anything. It can be from one of the other documents that are listed, or it could just be like an example from your brain. But you can also have MCQ questions in that first part of the exam on these documents, right? So it's not just the FRQ, right? You could have a question that's like, which of the following would the author of Federalist 78 most likely agree with? And there are some stimulus-based MCQ questions, and I have seen questions where it says like, which of this document that you're given, or this speech, or whatever, is most similar to the ideas expressed in which of the following documents? And it'll be like Federalist 78, Federalist 51, or something like that. So you will need to know these for the MCQ section too. Yeah.
Are the terms we do like in our homework, are those the exact same terms that they use for the AP? Like that's like the list of things they'll have you talk about?
There's not like an official terms list from College Board. That list is it's a mix of, the ones in bold are things that are like emphasized by the textbook and like other AP teachers and like in the CED. The ones that aren't in bold are also things that I think are important that, so like, but if you use that terminology, you would be fine, like on an essay.
No, is there like another like effector law that we don't know about that we'll
There
get?
shouldn't be, but every year there's always like there could be,
Okay.
I mean, you'll also be a better and smarter person, and you'll make me happy if you know the foundational documents. Okay, so that's all I've got on the foundational documents. Any questions on those? I don't think it's a good use of your time to go back and like reread all of them, just because like that's like a lot of reading. But so let me give you the cheat sheet.
Oh,
I'll give this to other people too.
No, don't. They're not here. They don't.
I feel like I remember it better if I have like a personal connection to like reading it.
I mean, yeah, like if you want to, like, go for it, but like, or like skim over them. But like the letter is kind of long, and Federalist 51 is pretty long. Well, I guess you have to read. I asked you to read the letter first.
Saying, don't do it. No,
Well, no, I'm
he's just
saying-
saying I don't recommend it. He's not like,
Yeah, I just think
what do you
like
want, dude?
it's a lot of. You don't need to know, like, I don't, like, some people always ask me, like, do I need to, like, memorize exact quotes? Like, you can, but, like, readers aren't neccerily looking for exact
But it's
quotes.
good to know the buzzwords, right?
If you know,
Like the
I gotta go.
yeah, if you know, like, key idea, like, stuff on, then you should be fine. All right, thanks, guys.